this is the line he pulls. He goes, so honestly, he's like, I don't know if it's just like the angle that you have, but I honestly thought you were more built. And I go,
welcome to Mets Prospective, presented by Verizon, our show focusing on some of the top prospects in the New York Mets organization. Jacob Resnick here with Joe DeMayo once again. And Joe, we talked about Francisco Alvarez in episode number 1. He got promoted right to Brooklyn. We talked about Brett Baty in episode number 2. He had an insane week against Jersey Shore, hitting .524 with 4 home runs in 6 games. So the Mets Prospective push seems to be real. We'll have an interview with Tylor Megill coming up later in the show. So let's get right to our Stock Watch segment first. Joe, give us someone who's been playing really well recently and someone who might be trending downwards.
Yeah, I'm going to start with a stock up, and I'm going to go with Bryce Montes de Oca, former 9th round pick by the Mets out of the University of Missouri, who he's a 25-year-old pitching in high A. He's making his organizational debut despite being drafted by the Mets a couple years ago. I mean, he's gone through a myriad of arm injuries. He was drafted 3 separate times before being drafted and signing with the Mets. And he's throwing up to 100 miles an hour on the fastball with the plus breaking ball. And coming out of the draft, he actually had a comparison to Dellin Betances as, a big right-hander with big-time stuff. So Montes de Oca, for me, is someone to keep an eye on, despite being 25 and in high A, that he might be someone the Mets push forward at a more rapid rate.
Yeah, and I've gotten to see him a couple times pitch for Brooklyn. He's got the long hair flowing. He throws so hard that every once in a while his hat will fall off onto the mound below him. So he's max effort. And like you said, if everything clicks for him, he could rise through the system. When he was drafted, he was kind of picked as that guy who could be the first to the majors from his draft class. And obviously the injuries have been what they have been, but certainly getting off to a good start. Now, Joe, give us someone who you were high on coming into this season who maybe hasn't delivered up to expectations so far.
Coming into the season, I had right-handed pitcher Riley Gilliam, who's currently pitching for Double-A Binghamton, inside of my top 20 prospects in the system. And back when the Mets drafted him out of Clemson in the 5th round, where he was, collegiate Team USA's closer, Jim Callis from MLB Pipeline actually said, this is going to be the first guy from this draft class to make the major leagues. And he obviously is not as of yet, and so far in Double-A, he's really struggling. Obviously, there's still talent there, so there's still room for him to grow and still, rebuild his status. But early on, he's not quite met my personal expectations.
For my stock up, I'm going to go with 24-year-old catcher Hayden Sanger. Sanger was the Mets' 24th round pick back in 2018 from the University of Miami in Ohio. Started this year with Brooklyn, a .966 OPS in 10 games. That got him the bump right up to Binghamton, where he's been hitting over 300 so far. He's an athletic catcher. He puts some really good swings on the ball, line drive approach, and he can handle himself behind the plate as well. He was actually a non-roster invite, a late non-roster invite to Major League Camp back in spring. So the Mets like him. Obviously, all the talk about catchers in the organization starts and ends with Francisco Alvarez, but knowing that the Mets have another guy who's a little higher up in the ranks in Hayden Sanger, I think is certainly interesting, and he can make a push in the next couple of years to maybe get some run at the major league level before Alvarez gets there. One guy that's caught both of our eyes so far this year is right-handed pitcher Tylor Megill. He's our interview subject this week, but first, Joe, why don't you tell us where the Mets found Megill and how he got to the doorstep of the major leagues, now pitching in Triple-A for Syracuse?
Yeah, the Mets drafted Tylor Megill in the 8th round out of the University of Arizona, and he's really made strides, I'd say, in the last 12 months. Going back to the instructional league last fall, where all of a sudden I start hearing Tylor Megill is up to 98 miles an hour on his fastball, and his slider is really showing plus skills, and I'm like, okay, this is something I could play. But to me, I think Megill has a floor of a high-quality reliever with a big-time 2-pitch mix. If he's able to develop that changeup, then you could have, a potential number 4 type starter maybe. He's a guy that I'm super high on, and someone that I've highlighted throughout the spring as someone that could potentially make it to the major leagues in 2021. And obviously with his recent promotion to Syracuse, he's simply a phone call away.
I mean, it's interesting to look at him as a guy who's going to turn 26 over the summer, but the mileage on his arm is not comparable to the typical 26-year-old. Obviously, was drafted in 2018, didn't pitch that much in his debut season. Then 2019, he had a few injuries. He wasn't going full throttle until about July that season. Obviously, 2020, season gets canceled. He's been pitching really well. His fastball has great zip to it. He's been spotting it kind of low in the zone. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to work upstairs with that fastball, because he can get a lot of swings and misses on it. The slider is good. He just hasn't really had to use it a ton, especially when he was with Binghamton. He was just dominating hitters with his fastball and didn't really have to use his off-speed pitches. So it'll be interesting to see how much he can work that pitch into his at-bats now in Triple-A. And like we're both talking about, he's right there on the doorstep. Definitely going to be interesting to see how he fares coming up in the coming weeks in Triple-A. This week's guest is Syracuse Mets starting pitcher Tylor Megill. Your name certainly not unknown going into this season, but you've definitely put yourself on the map so far, and potentially into major league consideration at some point this year. Just generally, what's led to your success through about a month and a half of the season?
I'd just say staying in routine with what I'm doing, and just every time I get out there on the mound, just getting after it, attacking hitters, and just having a ton of confidence in all my stuff. And once the ball leaves my hand, it's about everything I can do, and just trying to help the team out.
One thing that's always said about a prospect is you can't really judge them until they reach the Double-A and Triple-A level. That's really where the game kind of changes. What have you noticed since you've gotten to the upper levels of the minors that's different than the lower levels?
Batters seem to have a good idea of every pitcher and have a good game plan towards what they're trying to accomplish. You can't really get away with mistakes, so you really have to be on your A game every time you go out and every pitch. You can't really take a pitch off. I'd say the biggest part is you got to commit to all your pitches and be dialed in and really precise with everything you're doing.
What have the conversations been like with your coaching staff as far as improvements you need to make that next jump?
Just getting ahead in counts and really trying to really bear down on those ahead and count 1, 2, 0, 2, 2, 2, and really making quality pitches to where batters are swinging or putting balls in play, weak contact. I think that's going to be the biggest improvement in my pitching game, is just executing those ahead and count pitches.
It's said pretty frequently that playing at Triple-A can feel like you're so close to the majors, but also so far at times. How close do you feel like you are to reaching the major league level?
There's a lot of players, great players here. If the opportunity ever presents itself, I'm going to be ready to go and just keep working day by day. Just for me, being able to jump up these levels as fast as it seems to happen, it's just been that trusting my stuff and having confidence is the biggest thing. I've been placed here for a reason, and I'm trying to go out every day and, prove my worth, and just trying to have confidence in everything that I do.
You've got mail.
All right, it's time now for our mailbag segment, where we take questions from Mets fans on Twitter. And Luke Ferreras asks, what approach is the organization taking to help develop the farm system compared to past years?
So for me, it's a change to a more technologically driven philosophy. They installed TrackMan down in Port St. Lucie. They're developing a pitching lab. They're really transitioning from sort of an old school player development model to a new school model, which is, using analytics with Ben Zosmer, who's leading the analytics department at this point. So I think you're just going to see them move more into the new age with what some of the best teams in baseball are doing, and moving away from sort of an old model.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, but just look at the hires, some of the guys like Zosmer that you mentioned that were brought in, but guys like Carter Capps and Colin Hetzler, who have driveline backgrounds, advanced player development backgrounds. Jeremy Barnes, who we spoke to on our first episode, has a very progressive development mindset. Combine that with an analytics staff in general that has tripled in size. The organization has aspirations at being at the forefront of player development, and I think they're just kind of beginning that journey now, and maybe we'll come back to this question in a couple of years and assess how they've been doing. That's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Mets Prospective, presented by Verizon.
See the Mets of tomorrow play today. The Brooklyn Cyclones play baseball on the beach all summer long. Visit brooklyncyclones.com/tickets.